Hey everyone, it's Dominic again. Now with a new name from Waxing Poetically, because most people didn't know what that actually meant. And for those who still don't know, it basically think of it like a wordsmithing play on words, where the media would purposely twist words and make them sound worse than they actually are. It was called Waxing Poetically. Ron DeSantis and the governor of Florida actually mentioned it, which is how I got the name when they were talking about COVID numbers and how the media is just trying to blow it out of proportion and how they were actually doing pretty good. Anyways, so I changed the name of the podcast to Against the Media, because that's really what this is about. And this is not like, oh, we shouldn't have freedom of speech or any of that crap. This is calling the media out, whether it's the left or the right, for purposely misleading headlines to either drive fear, push their own agenda, cause clickbait, because they know people don't go past the headlines. See it on Facebook and Twitter all the time. It's very frustrating. And really just to get the truth out there, at least from my perspective and actually doing research. And what I say is I sit in the middle. I use common sense. So call me a libertarian, call me independent, whatever you want. I've said previously, both sides say stupid stuff. You don't have to follow, the left for everything that they do. You don't have to follow the right for everything that they do. It's some people, so they can do no harm. And I don't believe in that. So I think good people say stupid stuff. I see bad people say stupid stuff. So it does not matter. I think you should make your own opinions. But with that said, in this week's podcast, we're going to go over a couple headlines. Some of this is political. And like I said, I sit in the middle with the protests and everything going on. And my goal isn't to give you guys my opinion, because my opinion doesn't really matter on it, but really just to go over the headlines that might be associated with that, and how the media is now shift to COVID to this in order for like riots and looting, in order to spread fear and kind of take away from the actual message of the protest. So with that, we're going to start this week's headlines for misleading news, or whatever you want to call it. I guess I should come up with a segment for that, or a name for that segment. So the CDC 6 days ago, they released a tweet that says you can help protect COVID-19 by social distancing and wearing a cloth face covering that fits snugly around and reaches above your nose, below your chin. Watch the video, and it has a video of Robert Redfield, director of the CDC, actually put on the mask, and they're still preaching mask. However, the New England Journal of Medicine in late May released a statement, which is a medical journal, very well-respected medical journal based off research. And we kind of already knew this, but once again, media is trying to politicize it, and some of the politicians are also politicizing it. This is their stance on masks. We know wearing a mask outside of healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. Public health authorities define a significant exposure to COVID-19 as a face-to-face contact within 6 feet with a patient with symptomatic COVID-19, keyword symptomatic COVID-19, that is sustained for at least a few minutes. My understanding, it's usually about 15, but they say, and some more than 10 minutes or even 30 minutes. The chances of catching COVID-19 from passing interaction in a public space is therefore minimal. In many cases, the desire for widespread masking is a reflexive reaction to anxiety over the pandemic. So I could not have said it better myself. Masks don't really work. I guess it's better than nothing. Cloth masks definitely filter basically nothing. There's some that might be able to filter up to 30% if it's thicker, but I don't know if any of you have ever wore just a mask outside to begin with in this heat. It's painful and actually become hard to breathe, and I don't recommend exercising with a mask on, because it's just going to be harder to breathe. But especially a thicker cloth face covering, that's just not ideal. Surgical masks can provide up to 70% filtration. However, not all surgical masks are created equals. You can get one from China, from Alibaba or AliExpress, and it's probably not going to be as good as the medical grade ones. But they also purposely don't want you to get the surgical or N95. N95 or the KN95. N95 is actually a 95% filtration. That's where it comes up with the name, which are much better masks. So if everybody's wearing those, you're going to have a much better less infection rate of COVID because it filters out so much more. But since they're in short supply, they don't want you to get them. They don't even want you to get surgical masks. They want you to wear cloth masks, which basically doesn't really even do anything. So that's from the New England Journal of Medicine. You guys can look it up yourself. I'm not just making this up. So there you go. Next actually goes with the recent events going on. And like I said, everything that happened with police officer did being former law enforcement was wrong. You're never trained that. The other officers there should have done something about it. Not all cops are bad. There's good cops, there's bad cops, there's good teachers, there's bad teachers, there's good janitors, there's bad janitors. It doesn't matter. There's good and bad people in the world. Yes, it sucks when there's a cop in a position of power. It sucks, and that needs to be rooted out and better. I can already tell you, getting into law enforcement, it's actually quite difficult in the background check and everything that you have to do. But a lot of these people have been on the force for a long time, and so stringent background checks, 20, 30 years ago aren't nearly as stringent as they are today. But even then, that's really how we have to get better at doing all of this. So Andrew Cuomo, who I don't hate as much as all the people on the right do. I think he's the Democrat version of Trump, where he just kind of says what's at the top of his mind, and I think people respect that. And I think that's also why Trump got elected. Obviously, they have two completely different guiding principles, and I don't agree with everything that Andrew Cuomo does, but I do think he's not as bad as everybody portrays. I think what he did with nursing homes is obviously wrong and caused excessive death. But in hindsight, everybody would do something differently. But anyways, I won't get into that more. So Andrew Cuomo put 5 days ago, why are black people dying from COVID at higher rates than white people? Why are health outcomes worse in communities of color? Why did George Floyd die? Why does this happen again and again? It's all related. So I'm really only going to tackle the first part of this segment, is there are more black people dying at higher rates than white people. Well, that's not necessarily true. Once again, misleading headline. I'm going to just assume that he's talking about in New York, because he is the New York governor. Later on, actually, I might as well just cover a 2-for-1 special. Gavin Newsom in California, he put communities of color are overwhelmingly impacted by COVID-19. This was 4 days ago, so they're kind of one and the same with all the protests going on. Now, the areas that are affected the most, New York City, Los Angeles County, which are really the driving numbers behind all of New York and all of California, are predominantly Hispanic and African American people. That's statistically what it is. So, of course, there's going to be a higher number of people affected of color in those areas. It just doesn't make sense. It's like saying in Koreatown, a virus outbreak happens there and more Koreans are affected than anybody else. Well, duh, because it's freaking Koreatown, and that's just what it is. That's the demographic there. So it's just kind of misleading headlines, and they're trying to politicize this, and I don't like that. I think it distorts the message. COVID and this are two completely different things. I do think there is lesser quality healthcare in some of these areas. I do think there's lesser access to testing, and those all need to be fixed. But to say almost that COVID is purposely targeting a certain race or group, that's just BS. It just happens to be where it's at the time, and it can affect anybody. And I think we all know that. And to politicize that, I don't think is correct. We'll move on to the next story. This is from Business Insider. They said 6 states might be manipulating COVID-19 data as they reopen. That's Texas, Virginia, Vermont, Florida, Georgia, and Arizona. Shockingly, all Republican states. So I can already tell you, Business Insider is probably a Democrat left network. I don't know, but I'm going to just assume. Remember, never assume. Make an ass out of you and me, but I'm going to assume. But already in the keyword in their headline, might be. The media just have no obligation to provide any real valid reasoning behind anything that they do. I might get struck by lightning. I might win the lottery. Like, it just might. How are they allowed to publish this crap? But this is what I mean. They can just drive fear in these 6 states, as in, oh my God, they're lying to us, and it's just not true. It's already come out numerous times. Both left and right have said. Florida, for example, has probably the best numbers in the terms of how they report, how they show it, how they dashboard it, how they give public information out. So they just make all these assumptions to stir up their agenda. And there still has yet to be a major spike in in Florida, and they are still doing a fantastic job, even though they virtually just completely reopened. And I believe Disneyland is opening July 11th, Disney World, sorry. And I believe Universal Orlando is June 5th, actually. So that should be coming up soon. And I know a lot of sports leagues are starting to move over there because they are one of the few states that are actually allowing it. So if anything, these protests are going to give us a good insight on top of getting the message across is how COVID spreads, especially in these large gatherings, which most people, at least I can see on the news, are not wearing masks. And whether you actually really have the social distance or not. So at least in LA County, I have not seen a spike in numbers. I've actually seen a decline in numbers. But that's, I think today marks a solid week of that. It could be maybe people are afraid to get testing, maybe less testing is available. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm just saying I haven't noticed a spike in California. Next topic is actually a tweet, and it had to do with Trump's speech that he gave a couple days ago on the protesters and how it needs to, and the looters and the rioters. Remember, there's three groups of people. There's protesters, which are fine. That's their right. I agree with everything that they're doing. There's rioters. These are people like the Antifa who or pay people to just destroy property for no reason, to face it, whatever it is. And then there's looters, people who are just out to make a quick buck. Those are the people robbing Target because somehow that justifies everything that you're doing, and Target's the big bad corporation. I don't know why they're doing it, but I separate them all out because I feel like the news just buckets them into protesters, and I think that definitely loses the message. But if anybody actually watched the President Trump give the speech in the Rose Garden, there was no protester sounds in the background at all. And CNN actually pumped in the protester sound in the actual live feed through CNN's website. So I'll give you a little snippet of it so you can hear it yourself.
Safeguard their residents. Innocent people have been savagely beaten, like the young man in Dallas, Texas, who was left dying on the street.
So I don't know if you could actually hear that, but they were playing protester sounds as if they were protesting over Trump's speech, and that was just a complete lie. And CNN had to deliberately do that, and that's just malpractice on the journalism spectrum to once again push their agenda of anti-Trump, and that's just, love them or hate them, just why can't you just report stuff as it is? Why do you have to manipulate something on top of it? And that's the part that really bothers me. Anyways. There's a lot of topics today. Usually I'm only going to cover a couple, but it's been a busy week. So Futurism, for those who don't know, is a website that's supposed to go over tech and gadgets and stuff, but they've become very political recently, and I can clearly see what side that they're actually leaning towards. And right here, you can see the two misleading headlines in the tweet and the headline of the actual article. And when you contradict yourself, this is what really bothers me. The top says, clearly there is potential for improvement in what we have done in Sweden. The headline is, Sweden's hands-off approach to COVID has failed dramatically. So there's potential for improvement, and then there's failed dramatically. Two statements that don't go with each other. So they're basically saying Sweden has done a terrible job. And for those who don't know, Sweden never had a lockdown. They never really put a lot of rules in place. They never closed schools. You can see videos of them basically just living their life, and they're going the herd immunity route, which is about 60% of infections. Yes, they're still getting deaths. Yes, they're still getting cases, and I think last I checked, they were at like 30 or 40% towards herd immunity, so they're actually almost there. And they're saying, oh, these are all unnecessary deaths. These are all unnecessary deaths. But they've taken precautions to actually protect their elderly and their nursing homes, unlike what we did in the U.S. and New York. And per capita, they actually have a lower amount of cases and deaths than pretty much most of Europe. So once again, it's just a completely misleading headline in order to drive an agenda of fear and to say this is why we need to shelter in place and everything else. And that just bothers me. Yesterday, what I got? Three more. God, it's never ending. Okay, Andrew Yang, for those who don't know, he ran for president in this current election. I actually don't dislike him that much. To all my right. Republican friends. I know you're going to hate when I say that, but like I said, I try to, sit in the middle because I think, either side can have good ideas. It's not like they can't. He had the idea originally for $1,000 per person a month per family. It's kind of like a universal basic income. I'm not necessarily completely opposed to it. It's a similar approach to what Republicans do in cutting taxes to give more people money in their pockets to spend that gets reinvested in the economy. I know it's more complex than that, but I think it's a creative idea. I'm not saying it's, something that would be viable, but I applaud him for trying to do something different. Anyways, I'm not endorsing him at all, and I'm actually calling him out in this tweet. Yesterday, he put, "It would be great if there were people you could call for help that didn't bring guns," and that is just the dumbest tweet. I just uh, you call a firefighter if you want, I guess. Like, who do you want to call? Security if you get robbed or your house broken into, or home invasion, or what? I don't understand what you're trying to get here. You're making a statement that all cops are bad and they shouldn't have guns, but push comes to shove, guess what? If you're getting robbed on the street or held at gunpoint, who you're going to call? You're going to want the cops to come. So it's just another political thing of, all cops are bad. And being former law enforcement, I can tell you that that is not the truth. You're going to get bad apples in every profession. Yesterday, actually, it's been 20 hours ago. Deadline Hollywood posted Mayor Eric Garcetti is cutting LAPD budget $100 to $150 million. They actually have a $2 billion budget, and the mayor announced yesterday that they were actually increasing their budget, I believe, $10 or $15 million, as they typically do every single year because LA's population continues to grow. And so you need additional police force and precincts to support that growth of population. On top of, they're still driving old Crown Vics and everything else. Yes, there's wasteful spending everywhere. I don't care what corporation you are. It's probably even more so in government, especially working in government before. So my problem with this article is, and really just Mayor Eric Garcetti, who I do not like at all. I do think he has made some good technical strides for LA and modernizing it, but his political views I just do not agree with at all. I don't know how you can come out yesterday morning and say we're going to give you $15 million, and then the protesters demand you defund the police, and then you defund up to $150 million. I just don't understand. Like, you just completely gave in, and I just don't think that right. I think you have to stand your ground or give a justified reason. And his reasoning is they're going to reinvest the funds into communities of color, but predominantly the people affected by the crime are communities of color. So you're kind of trading one evil for another evil. I'm all for better education, better access to technology, and everything else, but just the way that it was done, I just don't agree with it. And $150 million for a police department is a lot, considering a police officer makes $70,000 a year, maybe less. If you're new, that's a lot of police officers you cannot get now. So you're going to get more people with less police officers, and I just think that's to be a recipe for a disaster. I hope that's not true. I hope we end up being in a better place. I hope we have police reform, but change happens slowly and it doesn't happen overnight. So I just wanted to bring that one up. And then the last one, we're going to go back to good old coronavirus. The Washington Post, which is probably one of the most left-leaning places, news outlets you can possibly go, and they just straight up don't even care. They are just anti-Trump everything. He can save a baby from a burning building, and they would say he didn't do it fast enough or he didn't hold the baby correctly. And I just loathe the Washington Post. But anyway, they put hydroxychloroquine, a drug promoted by Trump, did not stop healthy people from getting COVID-19 in trial. At no point in time do I ever recall them saying, "Oh, hydroxychloroquine will stop you from getting COVID-19." It's a antiviral drug. Like, you can't stop yourself from getting sick. We know that, but if you can reduce the severity of the symptoms and reduce the viral shedding, which is, me spreading it to 3 people, but me spreading it to 1 person, and you reduce the amount of time you have those symptoms, that's a game changer. You essentially change the outcourse of that virus or the disease. So they are saying, oh, it didn't stop people from getting it. Nobody said it would stop you from getting it. It said it would lessen your symptoms if you did get it, and the severity and the viral shedding. But once again, they're just trying to take something and just run with it because that's what Washington Post does. If somebody else proposed hydroxychloroquine, I can almost guarantee you in an alternate universe somewhere that they would be writing a pro hydroxychloroquine article right now. Whether you're for it or not, I just know Washington Post would do this. I think we still need additional trials on this in order to figure it out. I do think it does have some benefit, especially with zinc. Other studies have shown from China, from India, from France, so it's not me just making stuff up. And I don't think putting it in a later course of action like they did in the VA trials and other trials where you're basically already on a ventilator that it's going to help you, and then you're going to say hydroxychloroquine killed you, which is just not the truth. I'm not a doctor, but I've studied immunology, virology, and epidemiology. I have a certification in sports nutrition. I have a general understanding how the human body works and how these drugs work. So, as always, consult your doctor. But the fact that they're just writing a propaganda piece to push their narrative of anti-Trump, I just find is absolutely ridiculous. So, anyways, that will do for this week's podcast. I know that's a lot of stories. There's a lot of stuff in the news. I might do these podcasts more frequently if they become more popular and people ask for it, so I don't have to do longer segments. And I have changed my Twitter handle to Against Media Pod on Twitter, and please feel free to follow me there, where I kind of go over these stories as they happen and kind of my thoughts. Like I said, I try not to play the political spectrum of everything. I try to just use common sense. So if you like this episode, please share it with your friends. I'm trying to get it in as many podcast networks as possible: Google, Apple. It's recently on Spotify, Pocket Cast, and I'm using Anchor currently, and Anchor will automatically populate them to these platforms. So as soon as they become available, I will share them on my Twitter. And please send this out to everybody that you know. I think I got a whole 9 viewers on my first one. It could be more. Anchor doesn't actually track very well. So I hope this takes off. I'm just doing this for fun, just because I feel like there needs to be a voice of reason in everything. Like I said, I like Ben Shapiro. I think he does a very good job. He also, though, has an agenda just like everybody else. I guess you can say I have an agenda, but my agenda is to try to put the truth out there. And not everybody will agree with my opinion, and that's perfectly fine. So I just wanted to thank you guys, and hopefully if you haven't checked out the first episode, check it out. Hopefully this one is much better. At least I feel so. So please subscribe if you haven't. Please follow me on Twitter, and I will talk to you guys next week. Thanks.